Welcome to a very different kind of explainer today. We usually keep things pretty bright and upbeat around here, but for this session, well, we need to step into the shadows. We're going to examine a deeply unsettling series of events inspired by a genuine 1949 case that literally defied medical and scientific explanation. I need you to lean in close for this one because the details we are about to uncover are absolutely chilling, and they start with a completely ordinary family. This whole story brings us to a terrifying question. When you send a message out into the dark, what exactly is listening? And more importantly, what happens when the thing answering you from the other side just isn't the person you were trying to reach? Chapter 1, An Innocent Antique Gift. Okay, let's dive into this. Our story begins with a 15-year-old boy named Roland. Now, Roland was your average, normal teenager, but he had always held this deep fascination with the paranormal. So on his birthday, his beloved aunt decided to nurture that curiosity. She gave him this strange, antique gift she'd picked up from an old collector. With a smile, she told him it was a spirit board. You know, an object people claimed could actually speak to the dead. At first, it really did feel like just a harmless game. I want you to picture Roland for a second, sitting completely alone in his bedroom at night. The lights are low, he places his hands on the planchette, thinking this is all just a silly toy or maybe a prank one of his friends is trying to pull on him. He looks out into the empty, quiet void of his room and he asks a simple question. Is anyone there? The pointer moved. Just yes, right there, under his fingertips. He laughed it off at first, obviously, but the answers quickly became stranger and infinitely more specific. The spirit on the other end of this board knew things that absolutely no one else knew. And the situation escalated at a truly terrifying speed. On day 1, he receives the board. By days 2 through 6, this unseen entity is whispering through the wooden board, spilling hidden family secrets. I mean, it described dreams Roland had never shared with a single living soul. And then, the board predicted the exact date his aunt would die. Exactly 1 week later, on day 7, she suddenly passed away. The game was officially over. Chapter 2, The House Awakens. From the night of her death onward, the atmosphere in Roland's home completely transformed. We are shifting from an innocent teenage game to something deeply, deeply sinister. Because the entity was no longer confined to the board. It had literally bled into the very foundation of the home. The house itself awakened. The haunting escalated at a frantic pace. Heavy, echoing footsteps began stomping through entirely empty hallways. Thick wooden doors started violently slamming shut on their own. Large pieces of furniture were shifting and dragging across the floor with literally no one in the room. And every single night, at exactly 3 a.m., frantic, desperate scratching sounds clawed from inside Roland's bedroom walls. The house was turning against them. Chapter 3. The boy is claimed. Now, what's really interesting about this part is how the haunting suddenly evolved. The terrifying phenomena stopped being just environmental. It wasn't just the walls and the furniture anymore. The focus shifted entirely onto Roland himself. The boy was being claimed. You have these desperate parents blaming the old house pipes, and baffled medical professionals finding absolutely nothing physically wrong with him. But they couldn't explain the undeniable reality. Roland's bed was shaking violently without a single person touching it. He suddenly began speaking fluently in languages he had never even learned. Sometimes his voice sounded like a raspy old man, and sometimes it sounded like several different people speaking all at once. Then came the physical marks. Dark, agonizing bruises began blooming across the teenager's chest. And each morning, his parents would find new words freshly carved into his skin, as if by invisible claws. One message appeared again and again. He belongs to us. Terrified and totally out of options, the parents finally sought the help of priests. A first blessing was performed, and it actually seemed to calm him, but only for a single day. The very next night, the lights in the house violently exploded. Every mirror in the home shattered into pieces simultaneously. Roland opened his eyes, but they were no longer his. They were completely, entirely black. He smiled a smile that just didn't belong to him, and in a deep, guttural voice, he whispered, "You are too late." Chapter 4. The Ritual of Exorcism. Several priests were urgently called in.
The entity had deeply embedded itself, and removing it was going to require an intense, highly coordinated spiritual assault.
Let's see how this builds, because the night devolved into absolute chaos. For hours, the priests prayed relentlessly, which only provoked violent cursing in those impossible voices. Then the room violently shook as heavy furniture slid across the floor, pushed by an invisible force. When the violence turned on the priests, literally throwing them backward across the room without being touched, they refused to stop. And then finally, just before sunrise, Roland suddenly fell completely silent. He lay there, staring intently toward the corner of the room. The absolute terror on his face began to melt away, replaced by something else entirely. Tears filled his eyes, and he whispered these exact words: "I can see a warrior in shining armor. The darkness is afraid of him." At that exact moment, the violent shaking in the room stopped. A freezing wind swept through the entire house. From the very depths of Roland's chest came one final agonizing scream, so incredibly loud it echoed through every single room in the house. And then, complete silence. The terror ended just as abruptly as it had begun. Roland collapsed, totally unconscious. When he awoke hours later, he remembered almost nothing of his horrific ordeal. Over time, the scratches faded, the nightmare stopped, and his life slowly returned to normal. Chapter 5, a door left open. Years passed, Roland grew up. He actually became a highly successful engineer, living a quiet life, rarely ever speaking about the agonizing events of his childhood. To him and to the world, the nightmare was over. But there is a deeply unsettling footnote to this case. So the crucial point is, the antique spirit board was actually never destroyed. According to a private journal kept by one of the priests who performed the exorcism, it literally couldn't be. Instead, it was locked away inside a sealed wooden chest, hidden in darkness, keeping whatever was attached to it bound inside.
Before it was locked away, the priest noted a final message that had been physically burned into the wooden surface of the board itself. A dire warning for anyone who views these objects as mere toys. It read, "Every door you open stays open for someone." It's like they say, some games are never just games. Which leaves us with this final, chilling thought to wrap up today's explainer. The boy survived, the priests survived, but the board was only hidden, never destroyed. No one alive knows the current location of that locked wooden box. So, when you look at the dusty antiques in the corner of your attic, or those strange items you pick up at a thrift store, ask yourself, where is that chest today? And what doors in your own home might already be open?